Kia ora. Hello. This week we are back looking at the guilds. Previously, we talked about the role of the apprentice and then the journeyman. Now we're moving on to the masters of the guild. I think it's very helpful to look at the master as we consider them from a modern perspective before we move on and see if this holds up from the medieval perspective. The master is viewed as the most skilled in their craft. Once they've owned their skills as a journeyman, they will be inducted into the guild as the master. In this episode, we'll consider what a master is and their role in the medieval urban society. So, I have my history blazer on. Let's get started and dive in. I think before we go ahead any further, we do need to have a look at the guilds a little more before we have a look at the masters. The medieval guild is seen as the medieval version of the trade union. However, it wasn't. While one of the functions of the modern trade union is to raise wages, the guild sought to keep the cost of labour down. It is better to frame the guilds as a trade cartel, or that of a chamber of commerce. The guilds and the masters were interested in the exclusivity of their guilds. The guilds and the trades that they represented were also viewed with the sense of exclusivity. The greater guilds were made up of merchants and what were thought of as the greater trades, such as physicians, lawyers, and other scholars. These guilds required high entrance fees, demonstration of skill, or hereditary membership to become a master, while the lesser artisanal guilds often had lower fees, easier tests, or no requirements at all to become a master. But we are here to talk about masters, not the state of urban politics in the medieval cities. Or are we? So, you may have had to sit a test, pay a fee, be the child of a master, but ultimately to become a master, you need one other thing. That is your own business or workshop. Having secured all these things, you are now a master. The master is one who owns their own business and must pay guild fees to operate as a master. To be a master assumes that you've had enough toil as a journeyman, raised enough money and clients to start your own business. Alternatively, you may have inherited the family shop or received a loan from a benefactor. Those in the lesser crafts would have had a home workshop where they lived with their families, apprentices, and perhaps any journeyman that boarded with them, working on their crafts and selling them to the local merchants or other customers. The great crafts, however, such as merchants or the great banking houses, they have a less hands-on approach to their work. Instead, they would oversee the running of their business instead of individual production. This may entail having many workers or even subordinate craft guilds working for them. They could be called the first international capitalists, overseeing sometimes intercontinental trade networks with agents in many cities, planning shipments, arranging contracts, and making purchases all on the behalf of the master. All this being overseen by the keen eye of the masters, ready for the next opportunity. Francesco Dattini was one such person. After a lifetime of trade, he managed to amass not only a phenomenal amount of personal wealth, but to write volumes of correspondence regarding his business and personal life. Dattini, having finished his apprenticeship, started his first business at 15 in Avignon as a merchant. Here, he effectively skips becoming a journeyman, instead being able to start his own business through the sale of family estates and on the recommendation of his good name. Though to become a master was not a direct line to wealth. What it conferred was political rights and duties. These included military service, though if wealthy enough, a master would often pay for men to be equipped as an alternative to personal service. Masters had more political freedoms in the guild. The guild was effectively an autonomous body. It could fine, legislate, bargain, contract, own property, appear in court, and so on. The complexities of running the guild was overseen by a body of officers. These officers were nominated overall by the masters alone, from the masters, although in some cases lesser members may have had some enfranchisement. This I have also discussed in previous videos, also included the enfranchisement of the town councils. Who was able to sit on the town council or even vote was often hotly debated within the cities. To be a guildmaster would guarantee your voice in urban politics. Both Paris and London shared the distinction that citizenship came with mastership, not journeyman status. While during early periods of the communes, the mercantile guilds had greater control over the urban councils, as the lesser guilds were not afforded seats on the town councils. It is through agitations of the 12th and 13th centuries that the artisan guilds were able to gain representation and membership on urban town council seats. Obviously, being a master was an important thing, not only to your career, but your political and economic standing in the community. If it was as simple as starting one's own shop, to be a master, why did not everyone become a master? What kept most journeymen from being able to enter into masterhood was not being able to raise capital to start their own workshop, or that the guild masters were enacting statutes such as allowing hereditary entrance into masterhood to keep the cost of labour down. These regulations were a way to keep the ready source of cheap, skilled labour of the journeyman out of rising into the levels of masterhood, as the journeyman would earn half that of a master and the apprentice half again of the journeyman. This was a source of constant tension between the journeyman and the masters. For the journeyman, entrance into masterhood meant guaranteed economic freedom. Yet for the masters, to have a more upwardly mobile workforce meant more competition and a loss of cheap skilled labour. We too must consider the most powerful tool in the hands of the medieval guild, the monopoly. So keen to preserve their craft monopolies that they might often limit the number of masters into a guild at any one time, thus reducing the amount of local competition. In Angers, the head of the Butchers' Guild could only appoint new master butchers every 7 years, and even then it was necessary to obtain consent of the other masters, while in Limoges only 6 barbers were allowed. So too, we see some journeymen being former masters who, having fallen on hard times, no longer had their own workshops and now needed to sell their labour back into the workforce. And again, masters who could not afford to run their own businesses instead sold their labour on the workforce, renting their workshops and skills to more wealthy members of the guild and selling on their crafts. Given that many masters too were poor, it is not helpful to separate them away from the journeymen. They too were often wage earners instead of business owners. Millers, for example, were often subordinate to bakers. A Speyer Ordinance of 1343 had masters and journeyman millers treated the same by the bakers, but by 1410 the council had confirmed a separate brotherhood for journeymen and another guild house for the masters. So we can see that masterhood is complex, that masterhood was not a reflection of one's skills in the craft, but a connection to the political and economic power of the guild. In the next video in the series, we will look at women in the medieval workforce and how they participated in the guilds.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. Means you must have enjoyed the video. So like, comment and subscribe. And remember, stay safe, have fun, and keep reenacting.